Hello from the Dukascopy TV studio in Geneva. We are talking about China and its long-term economic prospects with Dr. Marc Laperrouza. He's scientist and lecturer at the EPFL in Lausanne. Welcome to the studio.
Thank you.
So, when we look at the current drop of the stock market, also the Bank of China's pledge to devaluate the yuan, what does it say to you about the state of the Chinese economy?
I think we have to look at these two questions or these 2 points in two different ways. On one hand, you have the stock exchange going down, and on the other hand, you have the devaluation of the yuan. So let's take first the stock exchange going down. The first thing to remember is that before going down, the stock exchange actually went up quite a lot. So if we look now back 12 months, we see that we are not very far away from where we were 12 months ago. Okay, so that's the first thing. The second thing is that when we speak about the stock exchange in China, we have to remember there is rather limited relationship between the stock exchange and the real economy. Okay, so there is a lot of, I usually tend to compare the Chinese stock exchange with the casino, where you have a lot of players, whether you win or whether you lose, doesn't really depend on the underlying assets. Okay, so that's one thing. So you also have quite some erratic movement of the Chinese stock exchange, because the people who are actually playing the stock exchange are not professionals like in other stock exchanges. Okay, so that's one side. The second part is the devaluation of the yuan. There the question is what happened and why did the Chinese government or the People's Bank of China actually devaluate the yuan. So probably there are two ways of looking at this. Okay, the first one is it whether to make the Chinese economy more resilient or more competitive, and the second one is it because the Chinese government wants to be part of the IMF special drawing rights basket. Okay, my analysis would favor the second explanation, meaning that the Chinese government and the People's Bank of China has tried over the years to make the renminbi as freely circulating as possible. It's no longer really pegged to the US dollar, and in a sense this devaluation can be mostly explained by this desire to be part of this currency basket at the IMF. Now, if you look at the IMF, a couple of months ago, it has declared that the Chinese yuan is no longer undervalued. But it looks like even this last round of devaluation will not really allow China to be part of this currency basket. So there's still a lot of work to do on the Chinese government's side.
Mm-hmm. On the other hand, when it comes to the government's objective, there was the big goal to have like a higher internal consumption in China. Now, with devaluating the yuan, doesn't this counterfeit the objective?
You're right. I mean, if you have an undervalued currency, obviously your imports are going to be more expensive. And so the question is, I mean, is it counterproductive? Now, if you read what the Chinese government wants to do, and you just mentioned it, it's to push domestic consumption. In a sense, you could argue that having your imports more expensive will ask or will force the Chinese customers to actually buy domestic products. So you could really argue that actually it's a way to push the Chinese customers to actually consume domestically rather than to buy imports. That's on one side. And of course, if your yuan is undervalued, or let's say of less value, it's easier to export. And that is still very important, because even if net exports actually don't bring anything to the Chinese economy in terms of growth, it still maintains or allows a number of companies to keep jobs. And we always have to remember that the priority of the Chinese government is to maintain social order. And in this case, what is really necessary, that having companies being able to export, remaining competitive, allows jobs to be kept, and hence makes sure that social order is there.
Mm-hmm. So this all said, we shouldn't forget that other markets, especially European markets, this week are going down. Because of that, they are losing they are losing the hope that China might be the world's growth machinery, or like pushing world's growth. So what is your point of view? Do you think that we are ahead of a longer period of a weak economy in China? Will China still be like pushing world economy?
The question is again, what time span you're looking at. Okay, so China has been growing for say 10% over the year period. Okay, now we're down to 7% officially. We could question whether China is still growing at 7%. Maybe it's already 5%. It depends how the statistics have been, let's say, managed. Obviously, this 10% growth period is over. Okay, now the question is really whether the Chinese government will achieve a soft landing or whether growth is really going to drop suddenly. Now, as I said before, it's really the Chinese government cannot afford to have a hard landing, because if too many jobs are shed, in a sense, it's going to create social tensions, and social tensions goes against the basic agreement between the Chinese government and its people: give us growth and we'll take care of the country. Okay, so for me, actually, if you listen or if you read what the European Chamber of Commerce has been publishing over the last 24 months or even the 12th month, or the American Chamber of Commerce in China, they have all mentioned that the Western multinationals are facing a harder time in China. Most of them are actually seeing, so the El Dorado period is basically over. But that doesn't mean that there are still very interesting pockets of growth. Okay? And you still have 1.3, 1.4 billion people living in China. So it might not be 10, 15% of growth. It might be 2, 3, 4, 5% of growth for companies. No, it's still maybe more interesting than in other emerged markets.
And when talking about growth, evidently innovation is the most important thing. And you are a specialist on innovation in emerging markets. Well, has China been as successful in really also introducing innovation that makes it to the global markets and is successful there?
There, I think it really depends how you define innovation. If you look at scientific innovations, there China is really, in a sense, rather far away. Okay? There are some very ambitious plans to have certain sectors of the economy, like nanotechnology or biotechnology, be at the forefront of scientific research and innovation. But this is pushed by the government, and it's going to take quite a lot of time. If you look at now companies, their innovation has not really happened at the high-end level in most sectors, but what is actually more interesting is that innovation takes place at the business model level, okay, or at the process level, meaning that because those companies have been under a lot of pressure, the way they actually compete is on price, is on making it to the market faster, or simply on innovating with a new business model. And probably the most interesting company there is Alibaba. Okay, Alibaba has constantly changed its business model. It's constantly innovating at that level. So it's, in a sense, it's a service company. They are not at the forefront of science, but they're still very, very innovative. And I think that's where we are right now in this stage, is that when you ask CEOs of Chinese companies whether they innovate, they say, we never needed to innovate because the market was growing by itself. Okay, so we didn't need to invest in innovation, at least not technological innovation. This need is now there. Okay? And now that's for most of the companies. You also have some very interesting and very innovative companies like Huawei. Huawei is doing very, very innovative products, okay, at the technological level. So now, how many Huaweis are in China? I'm not very sure. My guess is not many, okay? But this is 2015, so.
How about the electric car and also like innovations in the alternative energy sector?
If we look at the electric car sectors and the batteries, there is a company called BYD, Build Your Dream. This one was actually Warren Buffett actually invested in BYD. He was a big believer in this company. It hasn't really played out. Same with renewables. Now, in terms of innovating the renewables, there are not so many innovations. What is really interesting is that today China is the country which has the most installed base in renewable energy. And actually every year it puts more renewable energy production facilities than France. Okay, so it's growing. Now, it's not about innovation, but maybe at one point, you're going to have, again, innovation at the process level. Okay? And that's in the making. What is sure is that China has no choice than to be at the forefront of innovation in these sectors because of the huge environmental problems the country is facing.
Dr. Marc Laperrouza, thank you very much for being here today and sharing this information with us.
Thank you.
And thanks for watching. Do make sure to keep clicking back on the Dukascopy TV website for latest updates and exclusive interviews like this. Have a great day and see you next time.